Okay, Truth Crew, thank you for coming back in. We are now actually going to be exploring, discussing and explaining some of those dimensions and some of those densities. So this is the Fusion 7 Healing Truth School show, and on the Helen Christodoula YouTube channel. Hey Amy, how you doing? Sorry if I've missed some of your names, guys. I'm looking down at my tablet at some of the points that we're talking about right here. And we're going to be exploring and explaining now some of the dimensions and densities that are to do with the voyage of the soul. So in the first of these transmissions, we'd already discussed where it is possibly that the soul may be travelling through in terms of dimensions and densities. So now let's explain some of those. Some of them really are quite self-explanatory. So before we talked from the 13th going to the 1st, so now we start the opposite way round. We'll look at the 1st going back up to the 13th. Okay, here we go. So the first density is the mineral kingdom. So perhaps we might be occupying that. We might actually come as a mineral or a metal, because everything has consciousness. So you may occupy existence in that kind of form on this earth, and that can apply actually to any of the densities and dimensions. Okay. The second density is plants or lower animal kingdom. So perhaps you could be a plant or an animal, and this may be a bit of a dispute with some people who study the law of karma and reincarnation and say it's not actually possible to be flesh and blood, but ought to also be like mineral or an animal or an insect, let's say. From my own intuitive receptions, I will dispute that and say that it's not true. I believe that we can occupy any form at any time. Okay, so we have the animal kingdom. The fourth density, yes we can indeed, my darling. So the fourth density, we're talking about the lower astral, lower emotional realms. Okay, so lower astral could be beings that aren't particularly very nice. Yeah, when we say the word lower density, lower frequency, lower vibration, it means that it's something that could be unpleasant or could be what we call negative. Okay, so for example, if we have some kind of entity that may be occupying our space or our homes or something of this nature that is causing something unpleasant, then they will be actually occupying the lower astral realms, most probably. Okay, then we have fourth density, but is higher, and this overlaps with the higher mental realms or the etheric realms. So the higher mental realms, you're very, very welcome, Tasting. You're very, very welcome. So the higher mental realms, we're usually sort of out like into the clear in terms of like what we know as good and bad, yeah. And it's to do with the higher mind also, okay. So we're sort of like overlapping, we're coming into overlapping with the creative realms here, which is part of the fifth density, lower fifth density, which is called causal creative, which is where creation starts to come into physical effect. Are you... I'm going to move on, I'm not even going to answer that question. Right, so the fifth density is the lower causal realms. Yeah, I had to laugh at that one as well. Okay, so the fifth density higher. I've never heard anything like this before, very interesting. Well, then you will have to backtrack and look at the YouTube videos before that follow up to that, my dear. Welcome to England. Yeah, I do travel to England quite often. So the fifth density higher, Truth Crew, is the density of the soul, the last level of individuality. So basically, after you've gone beyond the fifth density or the fifth dimension, you then move away from individual soul, or what I call ego, the ego, okay, the individual ego. The sixth density is the oversoul, social memory complex, it says. So this is where we get into regrouping with group souls, but we will be talking about soul families and twin flames and soul groups and all of that kind of stuff in the continuation of the Voyage of the Soul disclosures to come after this transmission. So then we have the seventh density. Excuse me, sorry for my rudeness. You're not being rude, don't worry about it. If you were that rude, I'd block you. You're very welcome. Yes, it is interesting. So then we have the seventh density, which is the master oversoul, as mentioned. Okay, this is also known as the atomic plane. Okay, so this is where all of the souls gather as one, you could say. So I call this level spirit personally too. Okay, the eighth density, avatar planes and celestial heavens. Okay, so this is where we have perhaps some beings that have been teachers on this planet, or perhaps on other planetary realms also. Okay, avatar planes, great teachers. Ninth density, Christ planes, Buddhic planes, lower god realms. So these are in relations to some of these teachers or some of these deities that we know of that have been great teachers on the planet Earth, that have raised the consciousness of this planet and perhaps other places too. So that would be the Christ and Buddhic planes. That is the ninth density. 10th density, higher god and deity realms. These two overlap. The 9th and the 10th overlap and are very, very similar indeed. The 11th density is the universal realms. Hey, how are you? Thank you for rocking in today. Don't forget to share on if you find this interesting. So the 11th is the universal realms, and universal realms contains everything to do with vibrational frequency, light, colour, sound. And of course the 12th density is in relation to primary source, which is the 0 point of all of creation that I talk about in every transmission almost that I do. Hey Jess, how are you doing today? Now the 13th density, a lot of people aren't even aware of that, but it's actually very, very real indeed. In order for source to exist, it has to exist within something, and that something is actually the great void, the nothingness. Okay, so that in fact is the 13th density, the void and the unmanifest creation. And so these densities or dimensions, guys, are the ones that the soul may travel through, all, some simultaneously or one at a time, depending on its needs and its soul requirements and growth. So again, nipping out so I can come back in for any of your Q&A. Stick around. See you in a sec.